Good evening, everyone. We'll call this public meeting to order. If we could have Councillors Wells and Bodnar move the agenda. Any questions? Anybody opposed? That's carried. Disclosures of interest? None? Okay. We have two items under the statutory public meetings this evening. The first public meeting is a report for proposed expansion to the Main Street CIP area, which is 1 Neff Street. If I could have Mr. Schultz take this one over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council and members of the public and anyone watching at home. I have a very brief presentation on this one tonight, so just an oral presentation. The purpose of this is to pursuant to Section 28 of the Planning Act and to consider an application initiated by the City of Port Colborne for the lands known as part of Lot 2 on Plan 762 on the north side of Neff Street, formerly in the Township of Humberstone, now in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, and municipally known as 1 Neff Street. The Main Street Community Improvement Plan area is proposed to be expanded to include the property at 1 Neff Street, owned by Grandstone Living, Inc., and the owner requests that the subject property be included in the CIP area in order to be eligible for some grants and incentives that are outlined within the plan. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with Section 28 of the Planning Act as amended and Ontario Regulation 543/06. The notice of the public meeting was circulated to required agencies and placed in the Niagara This Week newspaper on October 6, 2022. Meeting details have been provided along with the council agenda on the city's website. As of the date of this meeting, no comments from any members of the public or required agencies have been received. At this time, Your Worship, are there any questions of clarification from council to planning staff or economic development staff?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Actually, one just came to mind today when I was looking at this, and one last week I brought up with David. I noticed that, and this is both for this application and going forward. So in a process like this, if someone wanted to be part of the CIP that wasn't originally there, is there a fee charged?
David?
Currently through the mayor, no, there isn't any fee charged.
Okay. I was just, and secondly, if I could, Mr. Mayor, I was just wondering, when you look at, I think it's Appendix 3, the letter from the Grandstone Living, who wants to propose that, the apartment building there. I was just wondering if you could explain, I guess in a world of wanting to sort of cut through red tape if it's not necessary, why is it, David, that these sort of areas aren't like squared up? So, you know, if you look at the marking in red, Grandstone's proposed building, you have other buildings that, or areas that sort of, I guess, protrude into Neff Street. I understand most of them are residential, but I've seen in some other mapping where they're not. So I'm going to use the example, if you go north of the red area, for example, why wouldn't that be in the CIP? Because my concern is that once you get the momentum rolling in a CIP and people are doing that, others want to join it. And I could see where there'll always have to be a boundary, and someone will always want to make the exception, and that's for us to rule on, and maybe it's a great idea, and we should be doing it. But in other cases, I mean, is it an opportunity to right size or square up these things? That's just the most glaring example, and I think that is currently a restaurant there now, the Thai restaurant. So can you explain why that is? I'm glad there was no fee, because it seems to me that there's not much difference between where one apartment was and the other.
David?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bruno, the reason the lands to the north aren't included is because they are actually federal lands. This property at 1 Neff used to be part of a greater holding with the rail line and the federal government, and they deemed it surplus and sold it off. So that's the reason why this property wasn't included at the time. Okay. But now that it's in private ownership, it's something we can consider. For the most part, federal lands you wouldn't really apply a CIP to that, at least from what I'm aware of. With that being said, there are other properties further west that you have noted that aren't included in the area currently. Those areas, when the plan was presented to council originally, I guess weren't deemed to be, meeting the goals and intention, I guess, of the plan. I'm not too sure. But the city is currently undergoing, as you know, the review of these CIP plan or CIP areas and plans in general. So that is something we're looking at to, square off any areas that should probably be in there through that process.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good, thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Okay, David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before opening the meeting to the public, I'd like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed community improvement plan amendment is passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And further, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed community improvement amendment is passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there is reasonable grounds to do so. To any interested members of the public, if you'd like to receive future notices regarding this application, you can contact me by email at david.schultz, schulz at portcolborne.ca, or by phone at 905-835-2900, extension 202. Or further, you can contact the city clerk at nicole.rubley at portcolborne.ca. At this time, Your Worship, are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this application?
Thank you. Anyone here for this application? Okay, seeing none. And there are no written delegations this evening either. And there is a sign-in sheet at the back, if you wish, at the very back right table, or my right, your left. Go ahead, David.
Thank you. One final. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the Community Improvement Plan amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons in public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of adoption and passing of a Community Improvement Plan amendment will be given notice. The proposed Community Improvement Plan amendment recommendation report will return to council at its regular meeting on November 8th. That concludes my portion of the public meeting. I will now turn the meeting back to you, Mayor Steele, to close the public portion of the meeting and receive the report for information.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. So this time we have one recommendation, that Development and Legislative Services Department Planning Division Services Report 2022-233 be received for information purposes. If I could have Councillors Bagu and Bruno move that. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Our next public meeting report is for the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment at 9 Chestnut Street, files D09-01-22 and D14-04-21. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mayor Steele. The purpose of this meeting, actually, I'm just going to wait for the presentation to come up here. Actually, while that is up, I will read the first part. The purpose of this meeting is pursuant to sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act and to consider an application initiated by the City of Port Colborne for the lands known as lots 504 to 511 on Plan 8 in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, municipally known as 9 Chestnut Street or Chestnut Park. The official plan amendment proposes to amend the official plan to facilitate the proposed development of a public apartment building on the subject lands at an increased density and on a local road, notwithstanding policies 3.2.1 C, C1 and 2. The amendment is required to alter the official plan policy to permit a density of 148 units per hectare and to permit the building to be located on a local road. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning from public and park to a special provision of the fourth density residential zone. The zoning bylaw amendment is being sought to permit the construction of a residential public apartment building on the subject lands. The proposed special R4 zone will allow a reduction in lot area per unit, reduction in minimum front yard setback, reduction in minimum corner side yard setback, an increase to the minimum rear yard setback for separation distance purposes, and a reduction of landscape buffer abutting a residential or public and park zone. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act as amended in Ontario Regulations 543/06 and 545/06. Notice of public meeting was circulated to required agencies and property owners within 120 meters of the lands on October 12, 2022, and meeting details have been provided along with the council agenda on the city's website. Staff received a number of comments from members of the public through the January 2021 circulation of the zoning bylaw amendment. These public comments have been included in the staff report and will be considered through staff's recommendation report. Updated comments from the Niagara region have been received in response to the provided noise impact study and planning justification report. They conclude that Regional Planning and Development Services staff is satisfied that the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement and conform to the growth plan and regional official plan, subject to the comments that they provided. The proposal will facilitate the construction of an affordable housing project, which the region strongly supports. The procedure to follow this evening will be to present Development and Legislative Services Department Planning Division Report 2022-234, receive questions of clarification from council, open the meeting to the public for comments, and announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of adoption and passage of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. At this time, I would like to present Planning Division Report 2022-234. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located on the south side of Chestnut Street and bounded by Locke Street to the west and Clark Street to the east. The surrounding land uses are primarily low-density residential with light industrial, with the exception of the light industrial use to the west and park space to the south. Next slide, please. The City of Port Colborne official plan designates the property as urban residential. Land uses in the urban residential designation include residential, neighborhood commercial, and community facilities and institutional uses. Next slide, please. The official plan amendment proposes to maintain the urban residential designation. However, a site-specific amendment has been proposed to alter the specific policies under Section 321 to permit a 40-unit public apartment building at a maximum density of 148 units per hectare, and that the building be located on a local road. Next slide, please. The subject parcel is currently zoned public and park. The public and park zone permits a cemetery, community garden, conservation use, cultural facility, food vehicle, park, public use, recreational uses, and uses, structures, and buildings accessory thereto. Next slide, please. The application for zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning from public and park to a special provision of the 4th density residential R4 zone. The zoning bylaw amendment is being sought to permit the construction of a residential apartment building on the subject lands. The proposed special R4 zone will allow a reduction in lot area per unit, reduction in minimum front yard setback, reduction in minimum corner side yard setback, and an increase to the minimum rear yard setback for separation distance purposes, and a reduction in landscaped buffer abutting a residential and or public and park zone. Next slide, please. At this time, Your Worship, are there any questions of clarification for planning staff from council?
Thank you, Schultz. Council? Questions? Councilor Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to David. So there's a request to change a number of things there as far as setbacks and everything. Is that specific to this, or does that happen at, different requests come in that it's changed? We haven't invented anything that is out of the norm here, right?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bodner, there are a few requests for, I guess, different variations of the bylaw setbacks, yes, that has been worked on through Port Cares and the city here. So there are some that are proposed to be worked into the amendment to, I guess, facilitate the development a little bit easier.
Okay, Councilor. Councilor Borger.
Through your worship to David. I didn't notice any site plan in the documents. Like, it should have been it's in an appendix in the planning justification report, but it's not easy to, like, if you zoom into it, it's not easy to see the dimensions that are being requested. So I'd really like to see that be a separate document in our notes and for the public to see as well as what's being proposed.
Yeah, our apologies on that. I should have included that in the report. It'll be included in the recommendation report as a separate appendix.
Okay. Councilor Bruno?
Thank you. Well, one of the things Councilor Bodnar asked twigged my mind thinking about this report and as it goes along. So I'm going to start first with some background. So the city's hired a consultant when we've been talking about an affordable housing strategy. So was this application pre that consultant's report or strategy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, I believe so, yes.
Yeah,
I know
that's-
my colleague here, Mr. Long, he's been involved with this proposal for some time now, so I believe it does predate the city's affordable housing strategy.
One of the things I'm concerned about is that we respond or ricochet off a proposal, which in some cases can be good because we don't have a patent on good ideas, and if somebody's got a good idea, it should be heard. My concern is that one of our good intentions is to provide land that will make an affordable housing unit happen. So if we can do surplus land, a park, an area where we have, that is good public policy, but it may not be good practical policy in a certain case. So I'm concerned that, so for example, in this case, you know, the region, so we do the good deed, we forego some money, we do this, and the region comes along and one of the requirements is a noise study. So the noise study happens where there is a industrial use that's no longer used in, I'll call, an employment noisy operation. So a noise study at a industrial zoned area that's not being used industrial seems to be a bit moot as to what the noise study's going to produce. And if it's, there could be as much money spent on a noise study, I'm no expert on that, as what we forego in giving up the land. Ergo, at the end of the day, I don't know that we've thought of all those things before we even do what we did. And so to come back to this one, are we also in a situation where the applicant's gone through a number of hoops, I'm assuming, to get where it wants to go with federal, provincial programs. Yet it's doing it in the absence of an approval. And so, again, this could be best intended that could go sideways. And I won't go any more than that because this is about this specific application. But where it does come to this point is if the region in a situation like this were to say it doesn't fit with their policies, would this go the route of a normal development project? In other words, they're an approval body here. If we say yes and they say no, this could go off to LPAT?
Schultz?
Through the mayor, in this case, the region is essentially a commenting agency on the city's proposal. So if they don't like the decision that council makes on this application, they would be available to appeal it. That is correct. Although there have been changes that have come out recently with respect to that and the region's powers, but I won't get into that at this meeting tonight. But so they are a commenting agency and they do have appeal rights.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Oh, Councilor Walls?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to David. There's been some claims that the city has other properties that would be more suitable for this type of affordable living. Do we have any of those identified? Have they been identified? Are they on our surplus property list to be explored?
Mr. Schultz?
Through the mayor, I think that's a great question. I would defer that to my colleague, Mr. Long here, if we have any sort of inventory.
Mr. Long?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. I am mindful that it is a planning meeting under the Planning Act, so I'll keep my comments brief. Right now, there is no surplus city real estate that we could make available for this project or a private sector developer. I mean, city staff are working on a number of properties that could be declared surplus, I think sometime in 2023, but nothing at this time, and nothing that would be suitable for this development proposal.
Counselor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further, Councilor Bruno's about the comment about the Niagara region, and you mentioned it's a commenting agency. I did find also the noise study that Port Cares had to pay for, and the traffic study that had to be done, and the railway noise that had to be done study. Like my grandmother lived on Chippewa Road for 96 years, and it never bothered her, you know. And those trains go a lot closer to residents, and it just seems like it's redundant to have to make Port Cares jump through those hoops when there's already, you know, common sense involved in it. So, you know, perhaps in the future we could take more of a look at common sense rather than, you know, costing somebody, you know, hundreds or thousands of dollars to do a study that, you know, you could just go out there and look at it. You probably know in your office right away without even looking there. You're a poor Colborne boy. So just a comment, Mr. Schultz. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, thank you. Mr. Schultz?
Any further questions, or that's it?
That's everybody.
Before opening the meeting to the public, I'd like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Further, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to do so. To any interested members of the public, if you'd like to receive future notices regarding this application, please contact me by email at david.schultz, schulz @portcolborne.ca, or by phone at 905-835-2900, extension 202, or you can contact the city clerk, Nicole Rubley, as well. Simon, if you're able to bring up that slide, the last slide of the slide deck, that would be great. And to any members of the public in attendance in council chambers, there is a sign-in sheet at the back where if you'd like, you can sign your name to receive future notices regarding the application. At this time, Your Worship, I'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance to speak to the application if they wish.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schultz. So we have one registered delegation and one written delegation. The written delegation comes in from Barb Degere, who's a resident, and that is in your package, council. And our delegation that's here with us this evening, before I go out to others that may be in the audience, is Melissa Bigford. Melissa, if you want to come forward.
Melissa Bickford, I live at 173 Chippewa Road. To Mayor and members of council, I am speaking tonight to express our concerns and questions in regards to the official plan amendment, file D090122, and to the zoning bylaw amendment, file D14-0421 for Chestnut Park and why it should be denied. An amendment of the zoning from public and park to fourth density residential special, R4XX, is not in the best use of this land in the neighborhood or within the city. We disagree that these lands were considered surplus to the city, as the parks and master recreation plan created at a cost of $70,000 states that even though there is enough parkland to service the current population, the city is deficient in the amount of neighborhood parkland required area based on the official plan is 18.31 hectares, and we only have 10.81 hectares. It was also stated in the response to the first meeting questions that Chestnut Park was large enough to accommodate the proposed development. But if that was the case, it would not have to come back to council for another public meeting requiring an official plan amendment or special bylaw zoning provisions and reduced setbacks. You can't fit a square into a circle. Under the D6 guidelines, any sensitive land use should have a minimum separation distance of 70 meters from a Class 2 industry. The building, as proposed, would only be 44 meters, and the property line to which the D6 guidelines are measured is only 24.59 meters. The planning justification report also states that this is not an issue even though a proper noise study was not possible at the property due to a work stoppage, and the special warning clauses of potential transportation noises needed to be included in rental agreements. The noise study also indicated that a detailed noise and vibration study is recommended to be conducted for the adjacent facility and the affiliated yard in accordance with the requirements of the MPC 300 guideline. Even so, a recommendation report will be back to council next week without the required noise study. Why are the D6 guidelines to ensure protection of abutting sensitive land uses not being met? Currently zoned as public and park, a neighborhood park, none of these issues are a concern. Another issue from this noise study is that it states that Barber Drive is neither a provincial highway nor a regional road and is not considered a potential noise source. The region does not have traffic counts for Barber Drive, and it is further assumed that a negligible amount of traffic travels on Barber Drive in this area. However, Logistec, a terminal operator that features laydown areas for oversized pieces, easy access for large vessels, flexible working hours, and convenient access for trucking companies, operates on Barber Drive. It should also be stated that the noise from the increase in dock vessels, outdoor storage areas, and increased truck traffic has been an ongoing issue affecting the surrounding neighborhood, being dealt with by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks since 2019. So to state that the amount of traffic traveling down Barber Drive is negligible is completely inaccurate. Where are the Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessments to determine if there is any soil contamination given the proximity of the site to the industrial lands to the west and the geotechnical investigation that was agreed upon in the Memorandum of Understanding between the City and Port Cares? Have these investigations been completed? And if so, where are those reports? The other major issue with this proposal is the reduction from 3 meters to 1 meter in the minimum landscape buffer abutting a residential zone and/or public and park zone. It is stated that the 1 meter buffer is sufficient to accommodate a privacy fence and the installation of coniferous trees which grow narrow and tall like cedars. As a landscaper, I do not see how a 1 meter or 3.26 feet is a sufficient amount of space to accommodate a privacy fence and a cedar row of hedges. Also, considering as along the main entrance exit roadway into the property, there will be no protection for the cedars which are susceptible to damage caused by snow and salt. Where will the snow from the entrance exit roadway be placed, as there is not enough room in the 1 meter buffer to accommodate mounds of snow? As stated in my email to council and staff, the public notice was not posted on the public notice page nor on the Facebook page, yet the other public meeting applications tonight agenda was. All public meetings should be treated equally in order to demonstrate continuity and transparency across the board and not decided by staff on a case-by-case decision. It is also concerning that the recommendation report to council will be brought back at next week's council meeting, posted this Thursday to the website. Again, another example that this public meeting is just a formality, putting the cart before the horse in the eyes of staff and council. In conclusion, under the official plan and the infill intensification does not match the pre-established building character of adjacent buildings, low-density users, or an official plan amendment would not be required. This proposal that has been doubled in height is not the best use of an exceptional neighborhood park or compatible with the adjacent uses of land. We have a limited amount of parkland available, and once it's gone, it's gone. The zoning bylaw special provisions and the major reduction in the established D6 guidelines for a Class 2 industry to allow this development on this property shows that it does not fit at Chestnut Park. We think too many important aspects are being omitted and that surrounding homeowners will feel the greatest effects of these shortcomings. All questions, concerns, and required studies should be brought forward and clearly addressed before any recommendation report comes back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions? Seeing none? Okay, great. Thanks again.
Sammy, I can email that to you. Is that better?
Is there anyone else that would wish to speak to this application? Yes, come on up and state your full name and address, please.
My name is Lee Matheson. I live at 307 Clark Street. This obstruction will be right in front of my house. Now, I'm not going to be as eloquent or as technical as your last speaker. We have been given no beneficial to our neighborhood by stealing our park and putting an ugly building there. But you also haven't given the neighborhood the detriments of doing this. Now, I'm not technical or anything, but I've lived through it. What happens to an older neighborhood when you do this? What happens is it gets tagged. Homeowners are pushed out, the oldest homes first, and it becomes a neighborhood of ugly, low-rise apartment buildings. Now, this happened in a growing community, and for over 50 years, this community was tagged. Now, whether we get tagged like the one in Sarnia as No Dad Ave, No Dad Neighborhood, Junkie Alley, Cocaine Lane, once you're tagged, your home values go down. And if you'd have done your homework, you'd have known that, because this has been tagged for over 50 years, and the tag still stands. Secondly, we're the neighborhood. We live there. Why wasn't this a referendum on the vote we just had? Because it seems to me that we're being replaced and being told we're second-class citizens because we have zero say. We don't have as many councillors as on the west side, so we'll always be outvoted. So I lived here 32 years, and I didn't know about east side, west side things, but apparently, after 32 years, I found out it's true. If you live over there, you're not worth anything. And that's really all I have to say. But I do want you to take a look at what happened to St. Catherine Street in Sarnia, which 3 generations now, the kids all know it as No Dad Ave, and the homeowners were pushed out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. No questions? Okay, David?
Seeing that there's no further delegates. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons in public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of adoption and passing of an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment will be given notice. The proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment and recommendation report will return to council at its regular meeting on November 8th. That concludes my portion of the public meeting. I will now turn the meeting back to you, Mayor Steele, to close the public portion of the meeting and receive the report for information.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schultz. So the recommendation from staff is that Development and Legislative Services Planning Division Report 2022-234 be received for information. If I could have Councillor Beauregard and Councillor Bodnar move that. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. No more procedure. Okay, at this time, I'll call this meeting as adjourned. Thank you.